What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another color grading tutorial. In this tutorial, what I want to do is I want to show you how to achieve this look that I created without the use of a single LUT or plugin. So you don't need to worry about having any pre-existing LUTs or purchasing any LUTs. We're just going to get into this and we're going to create this look from scratch, do it all ourselves, and I'll try to explain it my best as we go through. I should disclaim that I am not a professional colorist, so just take that with a grain of salt, that not everything I'm doing is necessarily right or perfect, but it got a look that I was happy with and just felt like sharing. All right, so first things first, we've got our clip here in our timeline, and let's pop on over to the color page in Resolve. And what I want to actually do first is just show you my project settings, because this is a color managed timeline. So as you can see, if you go to your color management tab, the color science was DaVinci YRGB color managed. The color processing mode was HDR DaVinci wide gamut intermediate. And then the output color space was Rec 709 gamma 2.4. So just make sure if you are following along with this grade to set your color management for your timeline exactly the same. All right, so then the next thing that you want to do is you actually want to go into the clips tab in the color page, and then just select all of the clips in your timeline, assuming that all of them were shot on the same camera. So then right click on your first clip selected here, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add an input color space. So for this, what we wanna do is just select whatever color space you shot the footage in. So for instance, I shot it in Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine Log 3. So that's what I will select here. So then that will automatically convert your image from log format over to Rec 709. And so that just kind of speeds up the process for grading. And as you can see now, we have a Rec 709 image right here. So now that our timeline is color managed and all of our clips have an input color space, what we want to do is, instead of starting in the clip section up here, we want to actually go over to the right and we want to select the timeline section. So what we're first going to do is we're going to be working in our timeline section to develop a look for our image. And then we'll hop on over to the clip section to do the color grading. So when working in the timeline section, what you have to know is that any changes you do here will impact all of the clips in your timeline. Then when we hop on over to our clip section of our node structure, that's when it's going to be based on the individual clip itself, and we're going to be doing the color grading and fine-tune adjustments. My node structure in the timeline here is going to be very, very straightforward. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to create 6 serial nodes, so I can just press Option S 6 times. Perfect. And let's just bring those down into the center, and then we'll fast forward and I'll just label all of these nodes quickly. All right, so there's all 6 of the nodes labeled with their respective name. Let's start with our primaries here. So what I want to do with the primaries here is basically make an image where this exposure is nicely balanced. And so I don't have my highlights looking like they're too bright or my shadows looking like they're too dark. So what I'm going to go in here and do is, first I'm going to bring the gain down. I'm going to bring it down to, I think I'm going to bring it down to about 0.87. So initially, as you can see, the highlights were looking a little too bright compared to the subject. So then what I want to do is I want to bring the gamma up, just because that focuses more on the mid-tones there. And so I'm going to bring this up quite a bit, and then we're going to balance it out with our lift. So let's bring it up to about 0.13. And then I'm going to bring my lift down to, I'm going to bring it down to about 0.06 there. So as you can see, before, after, before, after. So it just kind of, it brightens the subject up a little bit, adds a little bit more contrast to him. So then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to actually adjust the offset as well. So this will introduce more contrast to our image. So I'm going to bring it down to, we'll bring it down to about 23.4. So as you can see, before, after, before, after. So already it's looking cleaner than what it was initially. Then let's go over to our log wheels, and I just want to adjust the midtones. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring those up to about 0.09. So that's all I'm going to do for the adjustments in the primaries on the timeline level. So as you can see, before, after, already our image is starting to look a lot cleaner. So then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the HDR node. And with this, what we're going to do is we're going to use the HDR wheels. And with these wheels, you want to make sure that they are also mapped to the color spacing gamma that you are using. So I'm using Sony S-Gamma 3 Cine, as well as a gamma of Sony S-Log3. So just make sure you map it to the color spacing gamma accordingly. All right, so for this, what I want to do is I want to, let's see, I want to bring our dark value down. Yeah, I want to bring it down by like full stop there. And then I'm also going to bring the shadows down about negative 0.37. And then we're going to bring the light value up to, I'm going to bring it up to about 0.19. Sweet. So as you can see, before, after. So that's already adding quite a bit of contrast to our image, making it look a little bit punchier. So the next node that I want to deal with is our curves node. And bear with me, this one is a little more complicated. And the adjustments I made in here probably aren't the way you should do it, but it's the way that worked for me. So follow along as best as possible. All right, so we're gonna first expand our curves panel here just so we can see what we're doing. And the first thing I wanna do is I wanna actually unlink all of the curves just so we can work with them independently, because like I said, we're gonna introduce some colors into the highlights and the shadows, and we can't do that if all of the curves are locked. So let's start with this curve here. And what I want to first do is grab the bottom left control point, and I'm just going to bring it up ever so slightly, just because we don't want our shadows to be crushed. So this will help prevent that. It just kind of smooths out our shadows. So I'm just going to bring it about there. And then what I want to do is I'm going to actually add another control point about right here and just bring it back down to the line just to reintroduce some of that contrast back into our image. I don't really want that faded look in the shadows. It's a stylistic preference, but it just doesn't really go with the vibe I'm going for with this, with like a sports sequence. So then what I want to do next is I'm going to go up to the top right hand quadrant and get this control point here, and then I'm just going to bring that down ever so slightly, so that'll just prevent our highlights from clipping. And then next what I want to do is just add another control point right down here and just drag it up ever so slightly. So that just kind of reintroduces a little bit of brightness back into our highlights, just makes our sky pop a little bit without making it overexposed. We still want to be able to see some detail. All right, the next what I want to do is I'm going to add another control point here on our curved line, right where the highlights basically are. And I'm just going to bring it up ever so slightly, just about so. I'm also going to add a control point right about here and just hold Option just so it locks right on the line. We're just going to leave that there. All right, so then we're going to go to our red curve here. And what we want to do is we want to add a little bit of warmth to our highlights, to our sky, and to a little bit of the person's face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a control point about right here, and I'm just going to drag this up a little bit. And then what I also want to do is I want to add another control point just right down here, and again press Option while you're doing the control point just to have it stick to the line here. And then I'm going to basically keep it right here just so that the warmth and the red doesn't spill over into our midtones and shadows, just because we want it kind of contained strictly to the highlights. So then with the blue curve, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a control point right here in the highlights, just drag down ever so slightly, just to add a little bit of green to the highlights. That's just kind of the look I was going for. Then I'm going to put another control point here, approximately in the middle there, just so it doesn't spill too much over into our midtones and shadows. And then let's just go over to our green curve just to finish things off here. And then what I want to do here is I just want to push the green curve up here where the red one is, just ever so slightly. Then we'll put a control point down here. Perfect. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to actually go in and adjust a few colors specifically. So I'm gonna go into my hue versus hue curve, and I wanna change the green here of these leaves in the background. So I'm just gonna use my qualifier tool and just click on that just to see where that lands. And let's just try pushing that up. I just wanna make it a little bit warmer, a little bit more orange. But I also wanna make sure it doesn't get in our skin tones. So I'm just gonna click that as well. And that way we can prevent us from altering our skin tone colors. What I also want to do is I want to open up our vector scope, and I want to actually make sure that our skin tones are landing properly on our skin tone indicator line. And so then I'm just going to hover over our skin tones, and as you can see, our skin tones are lined up pretty well on the line here. I might just adjust them ever so slightly. It looked like they were a bit more towards the red values. Let's just see if that's any better. Yeah, that looks better. So that looks like it's lined up a little bit more evenly on our skin tone line. The next thing that I want to do is I want to just slightly change the color of this green. Not a huge fan of bright green grass. I like to have it a little bit more muted. So let's select that, and then we're just gonna make it a little cooler. And then what I want to do next is I want to go into our hue versus saturation tab. And so with this, what we're going to do is we're going to desaturate this grass here, because I'm not a huge fan of the bright greens. And again, it's a stylistic preference. So if you like bright greens, or bright greens suit your image, then by all means, feel free to keep them in, but we are minimizing our bright greens in this. So deal with it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so we're trying to make them a little bit more subtle and not in your face. We want most of the focus to be on our subject. All right, so I think that is good there for now. What I might do is I might go into our hue versus luminance, and I'm just gonna decrease the luminance of them ever so slightly. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. That looks good. And then the only other thing, let's see, do we want, might just add a little bit more saturation into this up here, the tree. Let's just do that quickly. Also add a little saturation into our skin tones. It's looking good. So with all of our curves, this is before and then this is after. Before, after. Again, it's subtle changes, and you can kind of adjust it according to your stylistic preference and what you're looking to achieve. But for here, this is what I did, and it worked for me. Moving on, what I want to do is I want to impact the saturation in our image. And the way we're going to do that is actually we're going to work with our primary color wheels, and I'm going to specifically be focused on the gamma and gain wheel. So what I want to first do is I want to first take out some gamma. So I'm just going to bring that down to about -0.02. And then what I want to do is I want to bring up the gain. I'm going to bring it to about 1.04 there. I find that this is a better way of introducing saturation than simply using a saturation slider. It just seems a little bit more natural and results in, I think personally, a nicer image. So then next, what I want to do is I want to go to our split tone node. And with this, we're just going to create a simple split tone just to add a little color contrast to our image. This kind of adds the teal in our shadows and a little bit of orange or warmth in our highlights, just to create that cinematic look that most people try to achieve. All right, so we'll pop out our curves here, and then what we want to do is just make sure that they're unlinked. And first things first, let's go to our blue curve. So like I said, we want to be adding some blue to our shadows. So basically, I'm just going to put a control point here in the shadows and just push it up here quite a bit. And then we're going to add another control point here and hold Option while we do it, just to prevent spillage into the highlights. And then what I want to do is I want to go to our green curve, and we're going to do the same thing but just a little less. So just a control point right around here, and then another control point here. Perfect. And so then with our red curve, what I'm going to do is we're going to focus on the highlights. So I'm going to put a control point here and then just shift it up ever so slightly. The red tends to be a bit touchy. So again, we'll put a control point here and just bring it down to about the same area as the other control points. So let's see what we've done. So that's introduced quite a bit of blue, and it's probably a little bit more than I bargained for. So let's just kind of tone that down a little bit. I'm just gonna bring this control point back just to dial it in a little bit. Same with the green one. And then with the red, I wanna also just bring the control point up here, just so it focuses strictly on the highlights. So let's see, before, after, before, after. So again, it's just adding a little bit more depth to our shadows and making sure that they're not just strictly black and that they actually have a little color contrast to them. And then one final thing that I'm going to do is with the blue curve, I'm just going to add another control point here and just pull it down a little bit just to add a little yellow to our highlights. And so then we'll put another control point here, just bring it down to where the red control point is. And so then with the final node, our glow node, what I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna go over to our effects panel and just search up the glow effect in our effects library. And so just drag and drop, and then I'm gonna bring the shine threshold all the way down, the spread all the way down, and I'm gonna select composite type and just do soft light. And we're gonna then go to the global blend, and we're gonna bring this down quite a bit. We want it very subtle again. Perfect. That should do the trick. So before, after, it's almost not noticeable, just adds a little slight pop to our highlights, and that is all we're looking for. So that should cut it for our timeline adjustments. So as you can see, this is our color managed image, and then this is now what it looks like after we've made our timeline adjustments. And so that should now impact all of the clips in our timeline. So they should all now have a more uniform look to them. And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go over to the clip section here. So this is where we're gonna do our color grade, and we're gonna finesse our look for the individual clips. So what I wanna do for my node structure for this is I'm gonna do 2 parallel nodes here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 2 serial nodes up above as so here. And I'm actually gonna add one more down here. And so then what we're gonna do is we're gonna label these. So going into the primaries node here. So with the primaries node, we're just gonna go into our primary color wheels tab, and we're just gonna play around with the lift, gamma, and gain until we achieve an image where our highlights, our midtones, and our shadows seem pretty balanced and produce an image that is looking good. I'm gonna first focus on the shadows a bit. So I'm just gonna bring the lift up to about 0.03 here. And then what I wanna do is I wanna bring the gamma down to about -0.02. And then with the gain, it's pretty good where it's at, but I'm just gonna bring it down slightly. Yeah, just to 0.99. So as you can see, before, after, it just kind of brightens up our image a little bit. Let's pop on over to our balance node. And with this one, again, we're gonna be working in our color wheels. I'm just gonna play around with the color wheels a little bit to see what looks good. Basically, we just wanna make sure that our skin tones remain still on the skin tone line indicator. I think I'm happy with that. It just kind of warms up the image because it was looking a little cool before. All right, so these are the adjustments that I made for my balance. Just very minor, slight adjustments. But as you can see, before, after, it was just looking a little too cool for my liking. So that's what we ended up with. And again, your image is gonna be different. So just adjust it according to what you prefer. All right, so then moving on to our saturation node. For our saturation node, what we wanna do is, again, we wanna work with our gamma and gain. So I'm gonna first bump up the gamma by a decent amount here, and then I'm gonna bring down the gain quite a bit. All right, so after playing around with the gamma and gain, I've kind of found something that I'm pretty happy with. This is before, after. It just takes a little edge out of the highlights. What you can also do is you can also add a little contrast curve here in this next node, just to add a little bit of a pop back in. So let's relink all of our curves. And so what we'll do for this one is we'll turn on our editable splines. We'll bring down this control point here, and then just bring up our editable spline. Let's bring this down a little bit more. And then we'll also do a control point here. We can just bring it up ever so slightly, and then just bring our editable spline down. Let's just see. before, after, just add a little bit more pop here. With this, you kind of just need to adjust it according to what you're looking to achieve. All right, so after some playing around, just kind of created a little S curve here. And as you can see, before, after, just adds a little bit more pop to our highlights there, if that's something you're looking for. But yeah, so here is what the image looked like with a color managed timeline and then an input color space to the clips. So that's just making it a Rec 709 image there. And then this is what it looks like now with our look as well as the color grade. All right, so we'll just toggle these clip nodes on and off just to show you the difference between the timeline adjustments and the clip adjustments. So this is strictly the timeline adjustments here that you're seeing, and now this is with the clip adjustments as well. So I personally think that the clip level adjustments create a more film-like look to our image. All right, so that's all for the video today. Hopefully you learned something along the way and are able to actually apply this tutorial to some of your footage and maybe some upcoming projects that you might have. And yeah, just keep staying awesome, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.